Welcome to the Accelerated Discovery Forum Distinguished Speaker Series. Today I'm happy to introduce Rama Akkiraju. See, I messed up.
That's okay.
Akkiraju, got it, right?
Yeah, that's good.
She's an IBM Distinguished Engineer and Master Inventor. Rama is currently leading multiple projects in IBM's Watson division on conversational systems that can provide natural, personalized, and even compassionate interactions with users. This involves inferring users' emotions, tone, personality, and much more through text analytics and machine learning. I've had the pleasure of working with Rama and her team on some of these projects a bit, and so I'm sure you will enjoy the talk today. The title is Building Compassionate and Personalized Conversational Systems.
Thank you, Bob.
I'm eager to find out how you define compassion. I think I'll find out, sure.
Yeah, that's what we're here today for. Well, thank you once again, Bob, for the introduction, Michelle and Moo for organizing this. And I have to say, you all work in a great lab, and it's difficult to find this lab. That's what most visitors say, right, when they start the talk. That's supposed to be a joke, by the way, for those who didn't know. I work in this building, so it's good to be among friendly audience. All right, so we'll get started. I'll tell you about the work that we are doing in Watson about building compassionate, natural, and more personalized conversations, and also a point of view that we currently hold. A big shout out to all our team members, several of whom are here in the room, and some of them may be on the lab. So thank you everybody for all the collaborators, and we also have collaborators from Haifa Research who we work closely with on emotion modeling. And there also have been over the years many people who worked on several of these projects who are either no longer with IBM or have moved on to other projects. So I want to also take a moment to acknowledge them and thank them for their contributions. So just so we level set, what do we mean by conversational systems? By conversational systems here we are talking about the things that you encounter with when you're doing chat with chatbots or intelligent personal assistants like Siri, Cortana, or Amazon's Alexa, or even Google's Google Assistant now, which was formerly Google Now. Any kind of digital virtual agents or even robots. And this could be assistants in car, this could be health and wellness hotline systems, and I'll talk a little bit more about those, or could even be exercise trackers and motivators. So these are all examples of conversational systems, or they are also alternatively called as dialogue systems. But I'll tell you that this talk is not about conversational systems per se or the architecture of those conversational systems. That would be a very interesting talk. It would be about who has control in the conversation, how do you detect intent, do you use single initiatives or mixed initiatives, is it a slot framework kind of architecture? All of those would be great things to talk about, but today I'm not talking about any of those. What we are talking about today is about user modeling in conversation. So it's about really how do we incorporate the perspective of the user with whom the conversation system is having a conversation with, and the context around the user, who the person actually is, and the personality, the context, the intent, and the emotions of the person and such. How do we bring all of those aspects of users into the conversation to make an ongoing conversation into a more empathetic, compassionate, natural, and more personalized? So that's what we'll be focusing on. And we'll also assume that there is a base conversational platform that we can work with. And so we'll assume that we'll be building on top of that such a conversational platform to incorporate these user models. So consider this conversation. So you're asked, Joan is a person who is, let's say, a hotel guest, and she's asking, what's a good place to eat in San Jose, California? And Watson is the technology or the chat agent, let's say conversational agent. It says, what kind of cuisine do you prefer, Joan? Either Italian or Mexican or Indian or Chinese, any of those would be fine. Watson says, are you a vegetarian? Joan says, yes, let's say. Watson says, do you like fine dining experience or fast food? Let's say Joan says fine dining. Watson says, are you driving or taking taxi or public transportation? Joan says, I'm driving. Watson says, do you prefer a restaurant that has a parking space of its own, or are you okay to find street parking on your own? All right, I'm exaggerating here, but Joan says, yeah, parking space would be good. And then Watson comes with recommendations, let's say. It says whatever, there is this 3 restaurants, one is an Indian, one is a Mexican, one is a Chinese. you might consider all of these have ample parking. Okay. A typical conversation agent that we build for making restaurant recommendations might look like this today.
I never saw parking as a criterion before for restaurants.
Oh, in big cities, it could very well be, right, in New York or in other places. Yeah. But as I said, I exaggerate a little bit because I wanted to kind of show how it asks different questions before an agent can give a response. It works, but it takes many turns to arrive at the response, right? And the solution is not personalized to Joan. Now consider this revised conversation. So Joan again starts, what's a good place to eat? What kind of cuisine do you prefer today? That's what Watson asked, and Joan says, well, any of these 4 is fine. And that's it. Let's say this conversational agent now comes back and says, Joan, because you're a vegetarian, you're open to experiences, and you prefer fine dining, and you're likely to drive given that you're currently renting a car, I recommend this restaurant, the Ganges, which is a fictionary restaurant, it doesn't exist, slow cooking Indian restaurant on such and such avenue in San Jose, and it has ample parking. So what exactly happening here is the conversational agent actually understands Joan's preferences and who Joan is as a person in terms of her being open to experiences, and so she may try out this slow cooking restaurant this time, and also knows from the context that she's currently renting a car and she's on a business trip, and she's likely to drive there. So taking all of this information into account, Watson is making a recommendation. So, cognitive assistant is demonstrating all these preferences and understanding of a user and user context. It takes far fewer turns in the conversation to get to, the recommendation, and it's also a lot more personalized. So that's where we want to get to with user modeling, by incorporating user modeling into conversational systems.
It's like a conversation with a friend.
Yeah, that understands you, who you are, and has a context and has your history of your preferences and such. Right. So let's consider the second conversation. This is a health hotline scenario. Kathy is a teenager who is in maybe in middle school or early high school, and she is talking to this hotline that's been set up by her school, and so she starts out the conversation. It's an agent. It's not a human. It's an agent that she's talking to. I'm getting bullied in school. I'm so distressed. Watson says, Kathy, there are proven effective ways to deal with bullying and bullies. Would you like me to help you? And she says, yes, please. The system asks, because it's been configured for bullying, it says, are you facing verbal, physical, or social bullying? Right? Kathy says, okay, I guess she doesn't know what those things are, but I guess it's social and verbal bullying, and I'm unable to focus on my studies. My situation is so helpless. Watson says, where has this been happening? She says, in school bus, in recess, after school, everywhere. Why do you think they're bullying you? I think it's because I'm overweight. They call me all these names. It's so demeaning. Have you tried avoiding those who are bullying you? I can't. They're my teammates because I have to do a project with them. Now Watson says, well, all right, here is a short video that helps you with different techniques to deal with bullying. Right? This works. This is typically how health hotlines, a regular one you could imagine would be built. But it lacks compassion. This person is really distressed, and she's saying, I'm distressed, my situation is hopeless, it's so demeaning. And if you're talking to a person the nurse counselor would be a lot more empathetic, or at least compassionate toward understanding the problem, and she may come up with the same kind of responses, but a human would behave a lot more differently in terms of the responses that he or she would make to Kathy's situation. So let's consider this revised scenario. I'm getting bullied in school, I'm so distressed. Kathy starts out. Watson says, Kathy, I'm so sorry to hear that you're facing bullying in school. Don't feel distressed. You're not alone in this fight. There are proven and effective ways to deal with bullies and bullying. I'm here to listen and help you in any way I can. Would you like me to help you? She says, yes, please. So goes on, same thing, questions about verbal, physical bullying. And she says, my situation is so hopeless. So here says, oh, that is indeed unfortunate. Don't lose hope, Kathy. You can manage the situation, and I'm here to help you. And goes on, let me first ask you, where is this bully happening? And she answers it. So it's a compassionate companion, and the system is saying, I see, I understand, I see, like a human would say. It's so demeaning. When she said that, she said, I'm sorry to hear that, Kathy. That is indeed very insensitive of them to say that. Right? Have you tried avoiding? And Watson again says, I see, I understand the situation. And finally it says, after you had a chance to watch this video and the resources that I'm going to give you, I can play this role play with you. That way you can be more prepared to deal with the situation next time. So how can this role play be enabled in this conversational situation? This role play can be enabled when the chatbot or the agent or the hotline agent now can take a persona of its own and behave like a bully, right? And in the meantime, maybe pause and give guidance to her on saying, when the bully says this, you say that, and those kind of things. So in order to do that, even there, the chatbot needs to have some kind of a persona of its own, right? At this point in time, in order to do this role play, I need to take on the role of a bully. So these are the kinds of personification of these chat agents, and making the conversations a lot more compassionate and more natural, and also personalizing them for people is what we mean when we say user modeling in conversations. So now let's talk about, and I already stated that this is the goal. This is about inferring users' personality, their context, their emotions, their sentiments, and incorporating all of those into conversations. So let's see, how can we measure? Let's say we built such a system. How do we measure the performance of such a system? What metrics do we use, right? So it has to, the agent, when I say agent here, I mean usually the automated agent, digital virtual agent. It has to be able to come back with more compassionate responses in a fewer turns, right? Get to the point quickly because you have all the context and you understand the person. And of course, the time taken, not only the number of turns, the time taken to get back should also be shorter. And the measure of usage of the suggested recommendations, right? Does the user eventually end up liking the recommendations being made? Would they give thumbs up, or would that convert into their purchases if it is a recommendation, or actions being taken, as in the person actually goes to the restaurant recommended by the system, right? That would be a good way to measure that the recommendations that we're making are actually useful. And that's a standard measurement for any personalized or recommender systems. And that would apply just the same here, right? And we have to be able to increase the usage of the conversational systems because they're so useful, and they're actually like talking to a helpful person who understands their context. People come back to that system a lot more, right? So that would be another criteria as well. And eventually you can also do a survey and find out that whether customers who interacted with that agent liked it or not. So these are some of the ways in which we want to be able to measure the system that we eventually built. And I'll talk about some of the things that we have done. And of course we need to do a lot more. So now let's talk about when a conversation system is built. Typical conversation systems have these kinds of components, right? A user is interacting with some kind of a input module of the conversation system. The input module is really doing the speech recognition if it is speech-based, or text recognition if it is text-based and such, and doing gesture recognition and all of that. And then translating the said or spoken or written content into the intent of the user, right? What is the user actually saying? So that's the natural language understanding part. Once you understand the intent and what the user is saying, then there is the dialogue management typically that happens behind the scenes, which is all about given this intent and this particular kind of question, what might be the right answer to get back with, and managing that dialogue process and coming back again with a response that includes framing the natural language response, and that could involve natural language generation, or maybe just simply pulling the response from a set of documents or pre-canned responses that you have and coming back with it. And eventually output. If it is a speech-based, you want to convert the text information that you collected back into the speech or whatever the modality of the user that you. So these are typical steps in any conversation system. So when we talk about incorporating personalization, compassion, and all these user models into conversation systems, we look at all of these aspects in the pipeline, because the bottom portion of the rectangles here are showing the components of a user model that play throughout this conversation process. So when the speech or text or gesture is being made, those signals need to be detected in a conversation, because they have useful information about whether the user is distressed, whether the user is excited about something or is angry, or what is the tone and intonation and those sort of things. And in understanding the intent and emotions, we need to be able to really go beyond the said and spoken things to understand what is being spoken in the content, and therefore understand the emotions and such expressed. And eventually when you get back, it has to match the tone. For example, if a customer came in very angry about a product, capability and said, I'm really upset with this particular feature. You guys, your service is horrible and all of that. The agent's most natural response to that has to be more professional, courteous, and apologetic, right? Because they are having a problem. So knowing what is the right kind of emotional response to get back with in response to the emotions that are being expressed by the user is also important, and that is part of really framing the response and getting back to the user. So we argue that user models play an important role in all of the aspects of the conversational systems. So now we talked about some examples. We got an idea of what it means to have user models incorporated into conversation systems, and we talked about where all it applies now. What are the core models that we need to build in order to enable such systems, right? So let's take a look at that. So when we talk about cognitive systems, we usually talk about this: cognitive systems have the ability to interact naturally with people, right? We say that as a very important aspect of conversational systems. Now let's break that down into these different parts and actually examine what it means. Interact naturally with people, right? So it has three different parts. There is people aspect, there is interaction aspect, there is the natural aspect. So we argue that there are these three core models that need to be built. So the first model is about interacting with people. So that is, who are the people, have models for understanding people at a deeper level. Then the second aspect is about understanding the interaction patterns between humans to humans and humans to computers, and really bring that knowledge of that interaction into these models. And finally, the natural interaction part involves not only one kind of modality like text. It could involve speech, text, audio, video, all of this. So we need to incorporate all of these into the system. So now the rest of the talk is organized into these three different chapters: the people, the interactions, and the natural mediums, and how we can bring all these things together into user models. So I'll talk about the models that we are building for people, and I'll show live demos of it, and I'll talk about some of the techniques we've used and the accuracy and the measurements and such in this section of the talk. And the remaining ones are work in progress, so there would be more sort of what we intend to do kind of thing. So people are complex beings. We know that, right? They exhibit different emotions. They have different skills. There is different context in which they operate. They have different preferences. They emote differently. Given that people are such complex beings, how do we have a model of people, right? How can we build a model? Of course, there has been a lot of work in this area. So the question is, we looked at what are the different models that were built by others in the past to understand people. There are, starting with the field of psychology, there are many models in the field of psychology to understand people from the point of view of their personality, their emotions, their needs, values, and all of that, and we use several of them. And there is this effective computing field which focuses more on the notion of the feelings and emotions of people. There is decision theory that has looked at how people decide and what are the different criteria, the rationality versus irrational decisions and all of that. And a lot of work in that area. And marketing folks look at consumer behavior, right? There is a lot of work in understanding consumers from the point of view of what they buy, how they gravitate towards certain things and not. So there are many models that we can rely on to build a model of people. But the question is, which one is the right one for us, or is there a holistic one, instead of just looking from the point of view of how the user buys or how the user decides or how the user behaves? Can we have a more holistic view of the user, is what we asked ourselves. But then, why do you need a holistic model? Is that really important, is another question, right? Maybe you just need a model that works for the current situation that you're in. Why to boil the ocean? Well, we argue that for us, specifically in Watson, since we are building blocks and common platforms that are being used by developers and everybody out there for various purposes and various use cases, we cannot predict which use case a particular client will use it for. For example, when we built personality insights technology, which I'll tell you more about, we knew that it would be applicable to match people with people, but little did we know that there would be a dating company that would be using our service to match people up. So there are many situations that we would encounter, and for which different kinds of user models would be required. So we thought, well, we need at least for us to think about, we need a holistic user model, and because we are releasing this general purpose platform for developers. So we created one by assimilating all of these. So we use this as a guideline, and obviously this is going to be a journey, and we're not complete in this journey. So we created a model thinking about what is the inner state that user has, and how does the user interact with the environment, and what is the outer state that eventually these actions manifest in. So the inner state part is about how do users, who are the users, what is their existential being part of it, how do they feel, how do they think, and the environment aspect of it is that what is the context around them, how do they interact, and what are the different options and products and features and things that they're exposed to. And the outer aspect is taking all of this information into account, how do users explore and decide, right? And based on all of that, they're taking actions. Those actions could be purchases, anything. So let's open it up a little bit. So what does being mean? What does feeling mean? Let's take a look a little bit. So being, we look at being as not only the demographics, personality aspects of individuals, it's about the personality, their needs, their intrinsic values, their ambitions, goals, motivations, all of those kind of things are part of who an individual is. And the feeling aspect is not only about sentiments, emotions, but also about the feelings, the attitudes they have about for different things and such. Thinking is about how do they think, what is their cognitive style, what knowledge and skills do they have, what do they bring to the table. And if you look at context, it's about what is their lifestyle, what are the life events that are happening that influence their decisions. And there could be several socio-political, technological, economic things that may be influencing the context that the user is in. And the standard marketing mix type of options, right? What are they sensitive to in terms of the products, prices that they're being exposed to, promotions and such. And how do they, taking all this, how do they search, what preferences do they form, how do they communicate, their intent, and what choices do they eventually consider, and how do they decide, and those actions manifest in purchases, commitments, decisions, and all kinds of things which will have consequences. And in user models, we need to have this feedback loop that when we observe those actions, we should be able to come back and refine our models of who they are, how they feel, how they think, and such. So this is a model that we use. And I haven't specified the transformation function at this point on how do you take these emotions, personality, needs, values, opinions, knowledge, skills into really predicting those actions. Right, that's where a lot of interesting work happens, right? I mean, having a model to be able to infer all these attributes is great, and that's what we will, the work that we are doing. But in the context of the actual applications where these models are being deployed and used, a transformation function needs to be specified so that you take all this information that you're able to infer about the users so that you can predict the actions and such. So we'll talk about some of the things that we have done, but obviously those who are using these in their systems applications need to be able to build those transformation functions. So here are some models in literature for understanding people. We'll go through them very quickly to get to what we have done and some of the results. So several of you may have seen this iceberg model, which talks about how people's emotions, thinking, values, and beliefs really drive what manifests externally in terms of their behaviors and actions, right? And there are several variations of it. So basically what this is saying is that it's important to observe like how we do right now in all of the recommender systems of what people purchase and what they are doing. But what marketers are really after is not only an understanding of what they bought, so you could recommend the next set of things that people bought, but really about why is it that they buy what they buy. If you understand that those drivers, you can actually construct your marketing messages a lot more effectively, and also probably consider those types of product features that would appeal to a particular user and talk about those in depth, right? And there are several of these other models, Big Five in marketing, which is about the openness, how conscientious, how extroverted, how agreeable, and how neurotic an individual is, and then the models about human values, needs, and emotions. Yeah.
So I've seen
Right. You
the
have
Big
seen.
Five stuff for quite a while since the project started. What is there independent work that actually says understand? Let's say that you can actually model emotional state. Is there separate psychological work that if you understand the modeling and you affect the advertising message in such a way, you actually increase the result you're trying to get?
Yeah, I will show some of those
Okay,
results
great.
today.
Because that's something that for a long time, nobody could show.
Right. We have some of those studies, and I'll talk about those. And one is an in-market experiment that we did with Bloomingdale's, and Ruchi is here. Probably you can comment on that as well.
Right.
So just kind of quickly going over some of these, there are models that talk about personality types, Myers-Briggs models. Several of you may have taken some of these in your jobs or in student life that tell you about what kind of a person and what your persona might be. And there are models like these DISC, which classify people into 4 categories based on whether they're dominant or influential, steady or cautious. So there are many models out there. And psychology folks typically look at surveys as the mechanism for getting to all of this information to understand people, but we know that surveys don't scale. So we use machine learning type of techniques because people are leaving digital trails all over the place these days, right, on social media and everywhere else. So it's almost like instead of you sitting and watching on Spanish Steps who people are and observing them and who they are, you can now read their social media content and get to know them better and understand who they are and what their personality and what their likes and dislikes are. So
I tell you, sometimes I find that a little creepy. Ron, we know that you like sports, and I think, God, did you read my email or something? It's like, here's something of interest. Anyway, I do find it a little bit creepy sometimes that they know a little bit too much about me that I don't care for them to know.
Right. So I might as well come to that point right away. Yeah, privacy is a big issue in this area of user modeling in general. And the way to get around it is by using opt-in kind of approaches and also anonymizing it. So let me give you examples. In an opt-in approach, if I have on my mobile device this travel assistant or a digital agent that will help me in my situations, let's say with travel reservations and all of that, and I'm actually more likely to give it my access to my social media data to use that to give more personalized travel reservations and travel plans for me, and I know that it's used only by that agent and it's not passing that information to others, right? So in that case, I'm more likely to share the information because it's helping me, it's adding value for me, and I know my data is secure, right? So in those kind of situations, privacy hopefully should not be such a concern. And in other cases where you can actually anonymize, understand the patterns in large amounts of groups as to how people behave and why they behave that way. And when a particular individual comes, again, based on opt-in, you can personalize the recommendations based on that.
You're confident they're not sharing with other people because they say they're not going to do it, or why?
No, these are applications, applications that you can control and you can explicitly give access or deny access to, right? Saying, no, I don't want you to use any of my
I give them access, but how do I know they won't share it with somebody else?
Yeah, I mean, their legal laws and those things can cover that, right? I mean, that's a standard question with anything. I mean, if you have a contract with a company saying that you would use it only for this purpose, you're bound by that contract, and laws could come after you if you violate that, right? So. All right. So what do we have? So let's get into some of the actual cognitive building blocks we have built so far. Personality insights, of course, tone analysis and emotion analysis, which is part of Alchemy Language API. For those of you who are not familiar with Alchemy Language API, it's one of the umbrella building blocks of cognitive services that we have on Watson Developer Cloud. And this image is taken from Watson Developer Cloud. Again, for those of you or interns who are not familiar with, if you go to IBM Watson Developer Cloud, you'll see these cognitive services, and you can try them out. Okay, so I'll show some quick live demos, and then I'll immediately come to Brent's question on how do we actually make these things actionable? Do these things actually make? So this is the personality insights. Again, I'll go through this quickly. You can all try them out yourselves. This is a service that's out there. You can, so currently Oprah is selected and her Twitter account is being analyzed. And here you are with her personality based on her tweets. These are the ones that you see, the personality needs and values. These different dimensions that you see are the traits that we have inferred or analyzed and from her Twitter data and are able to infer. And her scores are compared to people who are tweeting, other people who are tweeting on Twitter. So she's in the 92nd percentile, 91st percentile for extroversion and so on. That's the way to interpret these scores. And same thing for needs and values. And up here is where we are slowly getting into with our work as to what do people do with what, it's good to know that this is their personality, but that by itself is not actionable, right? How do you yeah, there was a question.
So these bins for consumer needs, you came up with them based on a pre-existing model, or did you derive them from data?
Yeah, these are from the models that I had shown earlier, psychology models, and yeah, we use that, but we're applying machine learning techniques to learn these traits. So what do we do when you know that somebody is conscientious or open, or is somebody who prefers tradition? How does that translate into their consumer behaviors and buying patterns? Is what we are beginning to address with various studies we are doing. And in some of the recent studies we did, we were able to correlate these traits with these actionable behaviors. For example, person who is high on agreeableness, high on extroversion is likely to buy eco-friendly products, likely to adapt to situations, spend on health and fitness, and is unlikely to put her health at risk and unlikely to change careers. So in Oprah's case, that seems to be true. She has been in that entertainment business for quite some time. She hasn't changed her careers. So, and then there is a summary as well. So what we are, in fact, this is going to be something that we are releasing as part of the Personality Insights API. So right now you only get these traits and their scores, but very soon you are going to be getting a list of those attributes as well, as to what you're likely to do. Based on what the scores are high for which traits, you will know what they are likely to do in certain of the consumption preference dimensions. Obviously, we cannot do it for everything. There are so many of those. So that's one. That's about personality insights. Now I'll bring all these things into the user models and what we are trying to do in just a bit. So then we asked ourselves, can we infer, in order for personality insights to work, we need to have about 4,000 or so words, text that's written by individual. And often we find out that it's kind of difficult. We don't often have that much. So we asked ourselves, can we infer one's personality from the text that from the images that people are sharing? And so this is a project that is a currently ongoing one. The results, although there is a demo, we are still trying to refine the technology. Tom Zimmerman leads this work. So here it is. So if you specify, let's say, Bill Gates. So it's now sending the images retrieved from Bill Gates's Twitter profile, and is passing through the Vision APIs and get a list of those interests and what the images are about, type of tags, and using those tags to run this machine learning algorithm to correlate those tags with the personality traits. So when this is done, we'll get back the personality of Bill Gates as inferred from images. So those were the top 10 images that top 9 that are being shown, retrieved from his Twitter account. And here we are showing on these different dimensions where does Bill Gates fall. So some of the questions that we are trying to address now is, do the personalities of individuals corroborate when you infer them from text and images? When you get it from Twitter versus Facebook versus blogs versus emails, are they the same? If there are differences, what are the differences and why? So these are some of the things that we have only preliminary results. We don't have good results yet to talk about. But these are a couple of projects, and now I'll show Tone Analyzer, and then we'll get into where we are with some of these technologies. So Tone Analyzer, yeah.
I have a comment that some people try to cultivate an image, we'll take Donald Trump, but we infer things from that very cultivation that they're trying to do, things they would not be happy about our concluding.
Well, yeah, so people can choose the persona that they want to project on different platforms. Of course, that is always the case, and we'll be able to only infer the persona that they chose to project in that case. But if we really kind of over a period of time, if we have enough text, it shows, the field of psycholinguistics shows that you are likely to converge, the results are likely to converge to your true personality. The true personality being inferred from the surveys. Now, one can of course also fake the surveys by answering them incorrectly or not be genuine. If that is the case, then yeah, we have a problem. But I think that other than asking people some not so direct questions and inferring their personality, we don't have other ways of really understanding one's personality, right? So one of the things that we assume is that there are some basic axioms for our work, and one of the axioms is that that the surveys are the ground truth that we rely on. Yes, the surveys could be totally misrepresented by the users, in which case we would have a problem. But to the extent that the surveys can be relied upon, which the psychologists over the years have done and said that these are the best measurements that we have of inferring one's personality.
I'm just saying something a little bit different. Trump might say over and over, I am important, and he thinks we're going to infer from that, I'm important. Instead, we infer from that, he's a guy who's very insecure, is trying to convince us he's important.
Well, just because somebody uses the word important doesn't mean that that person is important in the personality traits. All these words are used, and
Right.
their relationship to the personality traits is done through studying multiple people and their personalities, right? So it's not necessarily the case that important word occurrence will result in person's personality being a particular type that's associated with importance. So we move from personality to understanding one's tone and one's emotions. So here is the service for those of you who haven't seen it. Again, for those who have seen it, I'll go through quickly. There's a customer conversation going on. Customer is agent and a customer are conversing. This is a chat session. So we analyze the tone in it, and we get back what are the emotions being reflected at the document level, and what is the language style, and what are the social tendencies in the document that are being expressed. So in this particular one, anger seems to be the dominant emotion, and there is some amount evidence of analytical and some tentative tones, and the entire conversation is expressing quite a bit of emotional range and agreeableness, and we can break this down into what did the agent say, what did the customer say, and get those different kinds of individualized tones. And we can also get the information at sentence level. So if you want to know what is anger, what is reflecting anger in this sentence, which sentences. So where the customer is saying, you can't spell, do you understand the problem I'm having, or is this a lost cause? This is ridiculous. So the customer is really being very angry in this conversation, and it's picking up those sentences and classifying them as angry sentences. So this is the tone analysis. So now let's talk about, all right, so how can we really say that understanding these personalities and understanding these tones and communications and emotions actually is making any difference? So here is one demo that we did with Ruchi, who is over there. It was done with a large retailer in San Francisco, and so knowing the demographics here is important because the kind of products that you recommend depends on that. So you select the female, let's say, and the age group, and if you give the Twitter ID of the person to whom you are, say, offering a gift, it infers the personality of that person, and knowing that the person is of this type of traits, what kinds of products can we recommend? And here is where from the catalog of that particular retailer, a particular set of products are being recommended because the personality of the person has been matched with the brand personality of the product here, and we have built in some matching rules that says personality of this type is likely to buy products that have this kind of brand and image, and so these are the things that are being recommended for Adele in this particular case. So now for this particular thing, we actually Ruchi and team, the marketing team, ran an in-market experiment where they said if we made a recommendation using the personality traits of the individual, did these users actually choosing that product as for purchase. So on the kiosks that were put up in front of the stores, about 11% of the people actually ended up going through the recommendations all the way and said, I will buy this product, and when they clicked on that buy, it showed them where the product was in the stores. And that 11% compares to typically online about 5% conversion rate from browsing, searching to actually getting to considering buy. So this is one such an in-market experiment we did that shows that you can get factor of 2 kind of improvement in conversion rate when you actually personalize products. So let's get back and say what is the technology behind some of these. So I won't spend too much time on personality insights. Several of you have heard about it before. But we'll just kind of show this latest things. So we started out with using linguistic models. There was a dictionary called Linguistic Inquiry Word Count that's very broadly used in many of these works where psychology and linguistic areas come together. So we started out with using that dictionary, and but more recently we wanted to move to more machine learning based approach and not necessarily use any particular dictionaries to guide the system. And here are some of the latest results on the mean absolute error as compared to the psychometric surveys that we got on people. So, when compared to the linguistic, the model that uses those linguistic, the dictionary versus the new model, we are pretty comparable, and in most cases actually do slightly better. And that shows the correlations for these big five dimensions. So moving on, this is about how many words do we need to infer personality, and we did experiments on that, and we also show that if we use the more machine learned model, you can actually converge even with about 30 tweets to 95% of the accuracy that is possible. Ruchi, go ahead.
Behind tone analysis,
Yeah.
is it still using the same kind of text analytics? So first you convert speech into text, and then you do text analytics, and then you do the emotional analysis, or is it?
Currently, the one that's released, so the question was, do we still do speech to text translation for inferring emotions? The one on that we have released, yes, it still does machine translate. You have to do the speech to text translation before you use the text-based emotion model we have. But folks in research are working on models from speech directly and gestures and other things, which will be coming up later on.
What is the sort of the success rate when you measure or run the tests on it? What is the confidence?
Accuracy for emotions. Let me switch to that. Okay, let me switch to that, and I'll come back to addressing one more question that. So these are the results on emotions. We are right now at 66%, 67% accuracy for emotion, for the 5 different emotions that we are labeling.
There's 2 flavors of emotions. There's immediate emotions and there's long-term emotions. Long-term, you're a happy person. Short-term, you're an angry person.
Right. So this is the dynamic, what's happening based on each specific statement sentence you are making.
So this is
Short-term,
emotion.
yeah, the more fleeting one. The long-term emotional disposition actually translates into one of the personality traits, which is the emotional range. What is the typical emotional range you tend to have as a person in general? Yeah, this one is more sort of the immediate one. Yeah.
Okay, just one last question. So I find this particular application very, very useful. As you started out with an example of on the social media, and I'm just curious to know if there's any pilot in place, especially with the teenage and the young kids, the social media they use, right, to have this implemented as a pilot. Do you know if there are any talks in place for a demo or a pilot?
So I know internally one of the cognitive build projects that won the cognitive build competition has been looking at this kind of health line and discrimination type of hotline scenario. So that's one internal project I know which is looking to use some of this. Other than the immediate set of mini demos that we are building, some of our ecosystem partners like ID avatars have been using, considering these technologies, emotions and tones and personality to give a persona to those avatars which are being deployed in health hotline kinds of scenarios. So there are some client startups which are exploring these technologies. There was a question there?
So you said you used word-to-web. What was the vectors trained on?
Oh, that was the Stanford glove, pre-trained
Pre-trained
word-to-web vectors, yeah. Okay, so one quick thing to answer Brent's question. There were many studies that we did over the years since the original personality insights to correlate people's personality to actionable behaviors, and here are some of the studies, and several more are getting released as part of the API. So we know that people with those specific kind of trends are more likely to respond to tweets, which means they're likely to collect information. Who are more likely to spread information? Who's likely to respond to unsolicited advertising types of things? What kind of people redeem coupons more often? More likely to redeem coupons? And who are the kind of people that show brand affinity versus who don't care about brands? Who are the people who are likely to have a sense of satisfaction by being part of a community? And who are the people who express interest from gaining knowledge from content, and what would their personality traits be? And these are some of the studies that we did, and many in the literature that others have done, but we are only releasing the ones that we have done as part of the API, which hopefully we think will make the system a lot more actionable now, the traits in building these recommender systems and conversational agents. So yeah, I mean, I'll skip some of these. Yeah, so if you have, for example, typically, there is this person who shops at Target, Amazon, Whole Foods. She's been buying a lot of maternity clothes recently because she's pregnant. Typically, you would get disposable diapers kind of advertisements. But if you knew that she was high on altruistic and is high on morality and conscientious person and high on moderation, you may actually offer her coupons for cloth diapers instead of that. So these are some of the examples where knowing the personality actually makes a difference in making recommendations. So we talked about the images. Let's talk about emotions as a technology. So given a piece of short text, about 3 to 4 sentences, the goal is to detect emotions. These 5 different emotions. And we are using an ensemble model which has different kinds of algorithms in it, and the best of the best are getting chosen inside the ensemble here. And here are the results as and we collected about 100,000 annotated text sentences that have been annotated on these different emotions, and they include semi-val, IZER types of data sets, and also Twitter hand labeled data sets. Some of our members who lead that project, Preetham is here, for example, and Jalal as well. And here are the example. Here are the accuracy. I mean, we have ways to go, but this is where most of the emotion systems are at. With our ensemble models, by mixing up different data sets that we have, we are at about 66% accuracy in predicting these 5 different emotion labels. And we're working on more positive labels and additional ones as well. So a lot of people ask me this question on why emotions, how do they differ from sentiments, and how can you actually act on these emotions? So here are some of the things that we are looking at. There is this is really pulled out from the product reviews online. Somebody said, why would locating a store with mileage feature be taken away from this app? At least sorting, whatever was put back on. These are just stupid decisions on your part. You guys even try out the app before you put it on the market. So sentiment analysis shows that's a negative, and emotion analysis says that's angry. And you can infer that the person is unhappy with the product. But here is one that's actually interesting. So why would locating a store with mileage be taken away from the app? At least sorting was put back on. The fact that these things are being taken off and put back makes me nervous. What are these guys doing? Do they know what kind of product they're building? So of course the sentiment is still negative, but the emotion is fear, right? I mean, the person is nervous about using your product. So the kind of feedback that you would get is that it's not only that you're unhappy with the product, right, but it's actually you have a little more fine granular feedback on the product now, that there is some kind of a trust issue with the company that the customer is expressing, right? And that's important information to know. And where else could it be used? I mean, in this customer loyalty spectrum, people often want to know, where exactly is my customer? What can I do with this customer? Right? Is this customer being optimistic, thankful, satisfied, or is the person really, in that zone of frustrated? And it's not just it's not just enough to say that, negative, positive. You want to know these fine granular sets of emotion states that users are expressing, because actually now marketers are starting to really take advantage of this fine granular information. Some of these companies like Kanjoya, for example, to label, this person is a loyalist, this person is an enthusiast, this person is a refrainer, and that person is actually a defector and is likely to go. So it's important to know where a person is in the loyalty continuum so you can engage with that person better. The kind of message, the kind of marketing that you want to have is different based on that. So overall, with user modeling, people have a lot of privacy concerns. Ron brought it up, I commented on it, that you can either do it with opt-in or by being anonymized. In a conversation setting, though, it's usually kind of a one-on-one thing, so hopefully when the user opts in, their context and user information can be used better in serving them better. So now let's talk about, that's the work that we have done. Some of the work that we are doing, I'll briefly give an overview of it. How do we understand human interactions better? So when people are interacting with one another, we know, right? When that person is angry, or that person is happy, that person is really being, just indifferent to you. How can we make that a conversational agent really understand when the person is conversing, what kind of a particular situation the user is in, right? How do we, what are the patterns of these human conversations that we can learn from, so that when a person is speaking, we understand that pattern of communication and have the agent, the chat system or the automated agent, really understand the context and the pattern and act based on that. So there are again several theories of human interaction models. There is the human interaction styles, which is the Myers-Briggs persona model. We already covered that, and this is about understanding the personality, but also what kind of style or what kind of actions, or what kind of response types work better for people of these personality types, right? That's what we are after now in the interaction style. Knowing the person is the first part, that's good, but we want to go beyond that and say, what kind of things work for this person of this personality type? What style of interaction? So for example, for somebody who is, if we go back to this one, who is dominant and is visionary and, who just wants to get the high level picture and move on, for that kind of person, you don't want to give too many details. Right? For somebody who is very much into detail oriented, you want to provide as many details about the product and the situation as possible in order to make a convincing argument. So really kind of knowing those patterns of human interaction and incorporating them into conversational systems also makes the systems a lot more natural and personalized. So there is this other one by Linda Burns. She talks about another model of her own, about how whether this person is the kind who charts the course or works behind the scenes or is in charge of the situations or get things going. And in literature, there is techniques that people talk about as to how exactly you would interact with such people. And the speech act theory, some of you may be familiar, talks about really understanding humans from the speech perspective. Right? There is 3 different main kinds called locutionary, locutionary per locutionary. Locutionary talks about literally what is being said. If you say don't go into water, that means don't go into water. It's exactly as it said, and that's what the person meant. In the illocutionary one, when somebody says there is a snake under you, it actually means be careful, right? So there is a statement being made, but there is an indirect, and there is a social function associated with it. And in the perlocutionary kind of speech act, it's about the effect of what is being said. So if you say, and these are examples from literature and Wikipedia, if you say I have a CD, would you like to borrow it, you may actually mean it, but you may also be showing off a little bit, right? That I have this CD and I listen to this type of music. So there are some unstated types of actions in when people speak, and when I'm talking to somebody, there may be an internal agenda that I have, and that person has an agenda, and the dynamics of the conversation really plays out based on how people are interacting, based on their context and what they're bringing into the conversation. So what we are doing currently is really looking at these types of human interaction patterns and trying to model these and trying to understand if we can derive these from the conversation systems and patterns. So there are these, for example, agree. When the person said something, is this a statement that's about agreeing or disagreeing? Is this a person that's apologizing statement? Is this a person that's accepting? Or is this a statement that's of the type thanking? Is this about advising, asking? So if we knew exactly what category we can put this statement that a person made at an abstract level, although this is, an actual conversation is domain specific, but at an abstract level we are understanding the kind of conversation that's going on. This person said something, this person answered it, this person said thank you in return, or that person came out angry, this person said apologetic statement, that person gave something else, and the answer ended up in problem being resolved, and eventually the customer satisfaction led to customer satisfaction. So we want to understand these patterns in speech that lead to whatever the outcome of the conversation is, whether the user being satisfied or dissatisfied, whether the user being liking the recommendation made or whatnot. So these are some of the types of speech acts or dialogue acts, is the follow-on that comes from it, that we are now learning from conversations. So this could be, typically the patterns in dialogue act that they look at are, is this a statement, is this a acknowledgement, opinion, or is it an appreciation, yes, no question, nonverbal question, yes answers. And a slew of things that were found to be more relevant to detect in conversations that would have an impact in understanding what's going on and how the dynamics played out. So we are mining several conversations in customer agent call logs and discussion forums and such to understand these types of patterns, and hopefully we'll be able to share more results. So this is comes from the work that our collaborators in HIFA team are doing, and they came up with these interesting dialogue strategies, based on. So if you knew that somebody is, thanking, acknowledging, all of those, so what do you do, right? It's good to know first what to do, what is being said. The next thing is, for the conversational agent must know what needs to be done afterwards, right, in order to really respond more appropriately to that particular pattern of conversation that was detected. So for example, if you sense helplessness, you may offer choices, or you may empower them, you may provide expert recommendation. If there is anger, maybe the right thing to do is to allow them to vent for some time. The right strategy after that, you may want to acknowledge, without encouraging them to go further, or distract them if it is a kind of a scenario where distraction is the best medicine for anger there, or take a time out, right? There could be different strategies and ways of responding to these emotions and the conversation patterns that you detect in conversations, and respond accordingly. And so these are some of the things that we are now exploring by mining these call logs and other things to incorporate different dialogue strategies.
Is there a reflective component? Because you may have misdiagnosed a state of confusion or embarrassment, follow along a path, and realize that
that's
it
not
was your misdiagnosis and you're making it worse, or you're causing additional problems.
Yeah.
So is there a reflective watching the conversation to see if it's playing out the way probabilities?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So how do we make sure that what we are saying, our initial understanding of the way the conversation is going is right, and the strategy that we are taking is working or not?
This happens with, there's a whole underlying issue of semantics with machine learning, and I use semantics in the programming language, semantics.
Right.
Correctness in programming is either it is or it isn't correct.
Right.
In this world, it's all probabilities.
Right.
And
right. I mean, if we are hovering around 66-70% accuracy, we could have mislabeled a particular emotion, and we could have been taking the user down the path of, some kind of a strategy that is actually inappropriate. One way to do this is, actually get a confirmation from the user.
But then you start having those much longer conversations, like
Yeah,
in your very
yeah.
first slide, where it starts feeling really
Right.
stilted, rather
Right.
than I don't know.
One of the things that we are trying to do, that's why is actually mine a large number of conversations in customer care scenarios that have happened to see, derive from the data, what kind of strategies did those agents with whom the calls ended up more satisfactorily for the customers resulted in. What were the patterns? Can we detect?
Yeah, but you still sound like a computer scientist that's trying to build the correct system.
Yeah, I know. I think we have
fundamentally never going to be a perfectly correct system, so
Yeah.
we have to adapt to
Right.
the built-in errors.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think checkpoints in between to validate right from the user that this is indeed the case, or say, exactly, like, it may add to a few extra turns, but that could be a simple initial way in which we could incorporate it, saying, is this helping you, or do you, I sense that you are angry with such and such, would you like me to help you? So if the user says yes, then move on with the conversation.
Anytime I have a conversation with Ron, there's just always constant, like, does he understand what I'm really saying? Is he back on P versus NP?
Yeah.
Sure, anytime.
Yeah, I know that, Bob, you're a conversational agent too, if you have any comments on that. I know that's an important problem that's, from a computer science
Well-
perspective, it's always there will never be perfect, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's the issue of are you correct or not, and there's the issue of did you understand the user or the other speaker, and I mean, you can give the user an answer that is objectively correct, but if they don't understand it, then you haven't yet fully accomplished your goal of getting
Right.
this particular user who has different state of knowledge than another user to understand the answer to the question. And so, and you start off with one answer and see what happens, right? And you see if it's, because you don't know what they know. And so you need to have, sometimes they'll get it like that, other times you may have to do some repair so that this person can take some extra turns to repair it so that this person understands what that answer means, even if it's perfectly correct at the start.
Even
Yeah.
with people that
Yeah,
Exactly,
well,
that's what I was
that's
going to
what
say.
people do,
It
right?
happens even with people, so it's but
I make assumptions about what you know, and then I try something,
Right.
right, and see what happens. And sometimes I get it right the first time, and other times I have to adapt in ways that I could never predict until we get into the interaction.
So there may be an analogy in teaching scenarios, because you're doing the same thing with students.
Yeah.
I mean, you're
Yeah.
you're projecting what you think is the most likely way that they will understand the subject. Some of them will get it right away, others won't, and if you go down the path that you think they know, and you know, in that path, you're probably making it harder to step back. I don't know. It's
Right.
just that maybe there's another
Right.
area to tap into.
yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, there might be strategies to learn from other fields, yeah, like education and teaching. You had a question, and I'll come back to you.
Just building on what, I think it's important to get feedback, regular feedback, so that we're not going in a direction that we don't intend to. I had a question, what if in the conversation, build it in a pictorial, like in a more emojis, right? Sometimes because the way the different words get written. So is there a way to build it more graphic? The thing when I say graphic, I just really mean like emojis and things like that to convey emotions and get a response.
There's always a possibility, but again, you have to kind of balance that with how you would ending up annoying the user. Like that Microsoft clip example that everybody cites, right? You could really like it, or if it's showing different faces, this and that, you could get really turned off by it. So it's a balance we have to strike. I mean, I guess it's part of it is in experimentation, and part of it is the domain and the kind of application. If it's a professional application, you probably don't want to do those, and if it is more sort of with the children, maybe you teaching aid, maybe you want to incorporate some of those and such. Yeah. There was a question.
So I had an idea. What do you think of using the same thing to build a better gaming experience? So for a person who's playing games, to predict maybe what they'll do, maybe create a better environment for them. I mean, has anyone thought about that?
Yeah, that's a good point. So, I mean, we are building the core technology. We don't, in IBM as a company, we won't be able to build applications in all domains. So when we build out the platform and release it, anybody who can make use of this for their domain can use it. Hopefully gaming there is already quite a bit of interest in general in Watson and cognitive technologies for gaming. Hopefully they will be able to make use of this and build their own applications with it. IBM itself is building industry applications in only select set of domains where we know the domain well enough, and we have the route to market and such. Gaming is probably one thing that we would work with our business partners to bring those applications to market. But yeah, that could be a very useful one, and especially in multiplayer games, there are different kinds of dynamics going on and different things going on. How to adapt the system to the next level or downgrade it depending on the level that the user is at, and all of those things could be important. Yeah.
So in the first few slides, you talked about how helping with compassion would be helpful in the conversation. So is it a 1-0, or do you tweak how much compassion you can add? Because like you said, if like in the example, it may be annoying, and not in all cases you want to show compassion.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is one of the ways in which we are working with our conversational platform to integrate some of this is by making it configurable. So you say, I want to use this or not, or you say, whether this particular capability of user modeling personalized recommendation or emotion-based compassionate response or empathetic responses, would you like to have it in your application or not? So depending on the domain, it may be something you want, it may be something that you want to use or not. There may be some applications where it would be very helpful, in some applications where you are primarily giving factoid type of responses back. It may not be as important to have user model behind, because no matter who the user is, you have the same stock set of answers, but there are a large number of them, and we are doing conversation-based information retrieval, and so so it use it when it applies is what we say.
So is it 1-0, or you can tweak how much?
Yeah, so the gradation of good question. I don't know. We haven't thought about it, but I think that could be something that when we detect it, depending on users' own intensity level for emotion reception and such. In the emotion model itself, there is this whole notion of detecting the intensity level with valence, dominance, and those kind of models. But do we expose it? I think that's a good point you're bringing up. I think something to consider after the initial sets are gone out and we start getting some feedback. So let me kind of wrap up. I won't say much about mediums other than to say that there is, of course, gestures, there is speech-based, audio, video. There is a lot of more work that needs to be done. We worked on text-based. We collaborate with our colleagues in research who are working on other things that we'll bring. So how do we bring it all together? So these, again, going back to the question that Brent asked, we did some in-market studies to see whether do these things actually make sense, right? So I talked about this coupon redemption. How do we know that these personality traits make a difference? People who are of these personality traits, who are highly orderly, self-disciplined, cautious, and moderate, are more likely to redeem coupons. This is something that we have done as a post-mortem study with a large retailer. So we actually showed them that if they had sent their coupons to this set of people, 47% more people would have redeemed coupons as opposed to sending them to random set of people. So this was one of the studies.
Do they want people to redeem coupons?
Sorry?
Do they really want people to redeem coupons?
Well, so this is the kind of scenario where you want people to come to the store to buy more things, right? You want, so yeah, there are some kind of coupons that, like the
surrogate for more people coming to the store, not actually.
Yeah, this is exactly to bring more people to the store. Yeah. And we also did some studies to see if you actually detect tones and if you actually understand the tones that people are conveying in a conversation, does the tones that people are conveying in a conversation have any impact on customer satisfaction or any correlation to customer satisfaction, right? So that's one thing that we needed to know, and based on that, can we predict customer satisfaction, as in how likely this call is going to end based on the tones that were reflected in the conversation. So those were the two things we looked at. And so in a Q&A forum we looked at, and we noted that when confident responses were given, customers are more likely to give kudos to those responses. So it's the same response, the content is the same, but the tone is more is delivered in a more confident tone. Again, tentative responses are less likely to receive kudos. That's a correlation we've detected. And this more very obvious ones, but at least we have validation of these. More angry customers are less likely to be satisfied after the conversation. So this is based on the tone, how the conversation might end. Customers who showed disgust, we noted that those conversations are likely to end and less likely to end in satisfaction. Interestingly, if the agent shows high emotional range, the call likely to end in unsatisfactory manner as well. So what this means is that agents are expected to be professional always and courteous, no matter what the customer is saying. They cannot lose their calm. We know this, it's pretty intuitive. There is no groundbreaking result as such, but what's important is that the correlations are important. That yes, I mean, you think content is the most important thing in a conversation. Yes, that's the primary one, but after content, the way in which you deliver that content to a person is also just as important. So we all have been in these situations where we got a response to some call that we made to a customer service agent, but when we put the phone down, we have a bad taste in our mouth, right? Could be because the agent was rude, could be because the tone was condescending, could be because it was very terse and not polite enough. Whatever the case may be, the answer is the problem is resolved, but yet you are not so satisfied. You don't want to give a excellent 5 on a survey of 1 to 5. You probably would give a 3.5 or a 4. So in those situations, it's this unspoken things, the conversation style and such that make a difference. So these are some of the studies that we have done, and we also did the prediction. Did I talk about the prediction? Yeah. So we tried to predict. So we don't know anything about what's being discussed. All we said is let's take the tone and can we predict whether this call is going to result in a customer satisfaction or not. And with about 66% accuracy, we can predict. And I think that's a pretty good outcome, given that it's nothing to do with content, it's just based on the tone, and we are able to predict whether or not this call is likely to end in a satisfactory tone or not. All right, so bringing it all together, what does it mean? How should a conversational system incorporate user models in it? Again, we assume that the conversational system is ongoing, and we say this is how we are thinking about it, and this is how we are going to be working on to build it. Get the user global context and user context first, and once the dialogue service and intent are detected, you want to see, is this about personalized recommendation? If so, based on the user model, personality, and all the information that we have about the user model, provide the personalized recommendation. It could even be that the answer itself has to be, if it's not a factoid type of question, the answer itself may have to be different for this user based on who they are, right? For example, the restaurant case, right? I mean, there is no one good restaurant you can recommend. There are many, and you use that user context to make the recommendation. And also, we are incorporating tone into conversations. So detect the tone, and also if the tone needs to be modified, like in the example where you say, I didn't show one of the demos, but we had one where the user says, I lost my luggage, I'm so mad. And the system comes back and says, oh, I'm sorry that you're so frustrated. And do you need clothing store to replace the clothes that you need to go to your business meeting next, right? So acknowledging that you're frustrated is something important, and it's not part of the answer or the recommendation. It's a response that the conversation agent needs to come back with, and that's what we call as tone modification. So it's not just detecting the tone, it's modifying the tone and the response, either by prepending, appending, or by changing the whole response itself to come back to the user with a more personalized and compassionate response. And eventually, when all this is done, we want to be able to, of course, summarize and capture all this information for next times when the user starts interacting with the system. So let me pause there and say, come back to. Yeah, I mean, there are interesting questions that we can all debate about, but these are pretty standard to any kind of personalized system. How tightly, and you were alluding to some of those about how the gradation and how tightly should they be integrated. Should the users give consent? Should the users be aware that there is a user model behind the scenes in making these conversations more personalized? Should they be given an option? And these are all application level questions, and depending on what domain, what application you're building, you can expose them and let the user know or not. And from our perspective, we want to kind of build the core technology and make it possible for application developers to build these systems more effectively. So let me pause there. So conclude by saying, our goal is to enable these more natural, personalized, and compassionate conversations. And in doing so, we are focusing on the user model aspect of it. And today I talked about some of the user models that we've built, the personality, emotions, and tone associated with people in how they convey things. And also the future work that we are doing, which is about really understanding the user interaction patterns, about how to model what are the different abstract level conversational patterns going on, and be able to adapt the conversation based on that using dialogue strategies. And some of these cognitive services that I have shown today are available on IBM Developer Cloud, so feel free to go try them out. Additional ones hopefully will be integrated into the IBM's conversational API, which is also something that's an experimental version of it is available right now to play with, which mostly does intent detection at the moment in the disguise of a dialogue specification behind the scenes, but it will be hopefully getting more richer in functionality in the future. Any further questions from anybody? I can take them now. Okay. All right. I think we're done then.